I'm going to talk a little bit about the techniques that we can employ in the facilitation experience. And Jim just did a great job showing you some of what we would put in the conducting category, which are visual and verbal cues, and we use those, this is kind of universal. You knew exactly what to do when he was doing that, right? Volume up, like come up, volume, lower the volume. And he did some gestures, like I'm going to play, then you play, and reinforce those with a verbal instruction. So he's delivering information to you, what's coming up, and what the relationship's going to be, call and response. And then, showing this group, you're going to keep going. And so all these gestures, is what we put in the category of conducting, or what we call conduction. I like to use the term conduction because conduction is like the active, in the moment form of conducting. It's like the equivalent of improvised conducting, right? So it's not conducting like I'm going to conduct a piece and it's all of this kind of 4/4, like you think of a classical music conductor or a band conductor, but it's more of go with the flow, you sort of in the moment. So we call that conduction. So conducting or conduction would be referring to the visual and verbal gestures and information as to what's going to happen, right? And that's one form of influence, right? And that's a direct and very efficient and very powerful form of influence, right? Because everybody can see what to do. You can see the hands, you can see this, and you're relating, what you're doing as participants is you're translating this gesture, you're translating this information you're getting into, I need to play louder, right? So I'm going to play louder. You're translating this into, I'm going to play softer, right? So what we call that is cross-modal. We're taking visual information or verbal information in terms of language, and we're translating that into musical behaviors, right? So it's going from visual to, or intellectual, I hear words and I decode the words and then I change what I'm doing musically. And that is very efficient and usually really good for creating unified behaviors, a unified immediate change. So when Jim goes like that, it's very clear, right? It's very clear what to do. It's very clear when it's happening. It's very clear what is happening. So we're going to stop, right? Boom. So that's really useful for creating immediate changes, especially with a lot of people, right? So if you have a large group, very efficient. Okay, so there's pros to that type of leadership. That's that's definitely being a leader, right, in the facilitator spectrum, taking a leadership role. There are some cons to it, and we'll talk about some of these things later. Like it tends to have everybody have to, right? So everybody's directed at Jim for that time. And I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything, I'm just saying that's how it works. So if people are playing, one of the challenges with conduction is, well, we have to make sure everybody's looking at him first. So if somebody's got their eyes closed or they're playing, like, you kind of have to figure out how to get them to see what's going on, because it's a visual cue. You can also, as Jim did, support the visual with a verbal. So, several times he reinforced the cue with a verbal cue as well, right? So that's another way to do it. Usually also when something changes, because we notice change, right? We don't notice sameness too much. In fact, somebody told me once, and I don't know the data exactly, I'm just repeating what I heard, but after about 4 to 7 seconds of something happening, once we recognize a pattern, we move on. We kind of check it and we say, okay, I got that. So even after 4 or 5 seconds, if something's repeating a few times, we tend to now, okay, I can relax. I don't have to pay attention to that so much. And that's why music making, repetitive drumming and music making can be very trance-inducing, because it takes up just enough space in our mind so that it's there, but now our minds are free to roam other places. So it's like it holds us but it doesn't captivate us, so where our minds can go other places. So talk about like shamanic journeying and that kind of thing. It's very interesting. So giving the brain enough stimulation to keep it occupied in one way, but then free in another way. But the point is, when something changes, like the volume changes dramatically, even if you have your eyes closed, you're going to open, what's going on? Something happened, right? Something changed. So now I need to refocus. And of course, advertisers know this, and people that make TV shows know this a lot. And that's why you see so many changes, because it's keeping your focus. And TV commercials, for example, every 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, there's a new scene, there's a new thing to look. So you just look at it, because you have to keep track of what's changing, because it's almost like a survival mechanism. I need to know what's happening. So I can't just check it off in my mind. It's not repeating. So there's no pattern there. There's no pattern. I have to keep looking. I have to stay focused. So even if somebody has their eyes closed, if something changes, they'll probably come back. So you have their attention. But the conduction as a technique, as a set of techniques, and we'll talk about some of the techniques that you can use. I mean, Jim did a great job, I think, demonstrating a lot of the techniques that are really common and useful. Volume down, volume up, continue to play, getting a group to continue, stopping a group, and then also, call and response. And I mean, what he just did basically that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all you need to do. That's all you need to know right there. Those are the main cues that we use. Yeah, foundational cues. So there's really not that many. So what I want to talk about now is another set of techniques that you can also use to get to some of the same places, not all of the same places, but a lot of the same things you can do. Like, so volume up, volume down, speeding up, slowing down, emphasizing things that are happening in the group, giving over control to the group, and making small changes over time so that you introduce new elements that have a little bit of an effect in the music but don't interrupt it. So they keep the music moving but introduce something different. Okay? So I'm going to talk about all those right now. And then we're going to jam some more, and I'm going to do a lot of them, and then we'll see how that is. We'll see what that's like, and then we'll talk about them again. So what those techniques are, the first one, and you're all going to practice this, we're all going to practice all these. The first technique is called grounding. And grounding is a purposeful creation of a rhythmic framework. It can also be harmonic. We have harmonic grounding, we have rhythmic grounding. In this context, because we're using drums and percussion, we're just going to focus on what's called rhythmic grounding. Rhythmic grounding is providing a framework, a place to be. So we talked about this last night. So rhythmic grounding could just be a pulse. Well, now we've got something, right? Now I've got a foundation. As opposed to everybody come in. Or even something that's not quite, as stable. Really hard to feel the beat there, right? So, as a facilitator, this is a skill. You want to create a rhythmic ground. It can be a pulse. It can be a groove. It can be in 3. 1, 2, 3. It can be in 4. It could be very like this. It could be more real. It could be very rolling. It can be any number of things, right? All sorts of things. Yeah, it's exactly. Got my accordion out. All right, so these are all, we could just call it a groove, but grounding is not just a groove, because grounding is a technique. It's an action that you use intentionally. So in the case of Jim starting, it was really great because he used Bill's rhythm as the ground for the group. So the ground can be introduced as an element to play to. So you set up the platform, and so I thought that was really great because instead of you saying here, you say, well, there's already a ground happening. Let's focus on that. So that's really facilitating ownership, right? Here it is. So that's one way to do it. If there's nothing, then you can create the thing. You can lead, be a leader, and create the ground. If there's something kind of forming, and this is my favorite way of grounding, so grounding becomes a verb, right? It's not just a ground, it becomes an action. It's a verb. I am going to ground the rhythm that's sort of there. Right? So if some people are kind of playing some things, I can listen and I can say, well, where does it sound like it wants to be? Where does it seem like it wants to be? Maybe here it is, I can kind of start to support some of the accents that are there, and then I can help ground a rhythm that's maybe a little shaky. Right? So grounding is an active form of creating this rhythmic foundation. Okay? And the basic ways we do it is we use instruments that can be heard and felt among the group while everybody's playing. So essentially you want to use something like a bass drum. Jim used the tambourine, right, or the jingle stick. Yeah. Jingle stick, which is great because it's different than all of what you have. Right? So it's a differentiated sound. So think about that. Keep that in mind. Different sound. Also, the jingles are high pitched. They're really in a different frequency range, so you can hear it easily. It's not blending in. The cajon or the dun dun. Any kind of bass sound, is really nice. And I like the cajon because I have both. So I have the low and the high. I can combine them. I can do anything like that. So instrumental choice is important. It may not be critical. You can ground on anything. You can play a grounding rhythm. But what is important is that it's steady, that it's what I would just say quality, right? Quality rhythm means it's got a steadiness to it, it's not changing all the time, and hopefully it's got a feel, what we call a groove, right? The feel of the music. So it's not just right? It's not, even though that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but it could be like, or whatever. It could have a little more juiciness to it, a little more texture. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, pizzazz. It's the thing that makes music feel good. It's the feel. It's the groove, and that's a matter of what we call micro timing. The big picture timing is just the big chunks, but the small stuff. Yeah, the flow, or it could be straight feel, it could be swing feel, it doesn't matter. But it's that, it's a little connecting.
Going somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. It gives
Instead
it that.
of just getting stuck there, it's just.
Right. It's that kind of those little notes that push it forward and give it that extra texture. So it's like the difference between food and a delicacy. It's just that nice quality. So in anything, and you know what that's like with anything, in your work that you do or anything you buy or anything, there's the thing, there's the chair, and then there's the Aeron chair or whatever. There's
a standard and there's the...
Yeah, something that where you say, wow, people who were making this, they took it to that level where it's nice, it's the right, it's good.